my mind when I hail Rastafari. Knowing his eyes are an eye. Jah be my guide, I reside with the Most High. Even in a drought I no cry. These are the times when I hail Rastafari. Knowing that Jah will provide for I. I said he give it and he take it away. Understanding nothing is belonging to me. Earth will provide you with the necessity. They say simplicity is what we use in the
ያሳረፈበት ድርጅት አድርገን ማህበር መመስረቻ ቃል ኪዳን ውስጥ ተገልጸው የነበሩ ማህበር መመስረቻ ቃል ኪዳን ውስጥ ተገልጸው የነበሩ ማህበር መመስረቻ ቃል ኪዳን ውስጥ
You give me a check. You can't cards go down. Cards go down. Rhythm just make. East. That's a second season and trample the beast and welcome mansion from outer east. I mean.
Representing the Iniversal Development of Rastafari, which is the community's main organ here in the DMV area. And we have Mr. Nabiat representing Ethiopian community, and both of these gentlemen are going to speak about the significance of the coronation. I hand it over.
Greetings. How is everybody this evening? We need some more energy. How is everybody this evening? Give thanks and praises. I greet you all in the divine name of His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile, Selassie I. And we are here celebrating the 83rd coronation celebration of His Imperial Majesty. How many of you love the music you've been hearing so far? Let me see the hands. Did you know that music was inspired by Haile Selassie I? Did you know that? Without Haile Selassie I and the coronation that we're celebrating, none of that music would be here. All of the reggae music that you love is coming from that inspiration. So I'm going to give a quick little presentation. I have some slides here for your visual enjoyment. So if you can come where you can see the presentation, we're going to go very quickly. Are you ready? Are you ready? All right. So this is the revelation of the coronation. And what you see here is Haile Selassie I, his queen, Empress Menen, and you see some of his children surrounding the throne, and that's very significant. Because in 1930, Haile Selassie became the first king in Ethiopia's history, the first emperor to have his queen crowned at the same time. So when you see the Rastafari, you have to think about Rastafari women as well. Give me the next slide. This is the picture of the coronation. This picture sent reverberations throughout the entire globe, but in particular in the black community. All over America, all over Europe, the coronation was shown in theaters, in movie theaters. This was important because up until this time, black people had never seen black royalty represented in real life. This is the first image that black people saw of their own royalty represented, and it was so powerful because this king was taking the titles of the King of Kings, the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah, elect of God, and the light of this world. These were titles that were connected to the Bible, and the black people were always taught that the Bible was a European story. So for them to see a black man taking these titles and expressing this bloodline, it had very powerful impact on the psyche of black people throughout the world, and in particular in the island of Jamaica. Give me the next slide. This here is Haile Selassie again with his beautiful Empress Menen. You can see a lion cub in the back. So these are the type of photographs that the black people were seeing. And it was very powerful because you see the imagery of black royalty, you see the majesty, you see him with his queen, you see this empire that had never been conquered or colonized, and you can imagine how it made black people feel. Next slide. Again, this is the coronation photograph. This was from National Geographic. National Geographic was at the coronation. They publicized the images, and you can see the regal nature. You'll see a color photograph of this a little bit later, where they had bright red robes, and it was very extravagant. Again, this is causing the black mind to say, wait, maybe the Bible does have to do with Africa. And then when they go and they research, they see Ethiopia is all through the Bible. They see that even the Garden of Eden makes mention of Ethiopia, and that this story is indeed an African story. Next slide. We're going to the 1930s now. Give me the next slide. In the 1930s, I want to put this in context. Who wants to go into a time machine with me right now? Put your hands in the air. Who wants to step into the time machine? Okay? It hasn't been invented, but we're going to try to see what we can do. You can see this is the height of Jim Crow. In 1930, when the black king is being crowned in the mountain city of Addis Ababa, you have a situation where black people are being lynched. Is a regular occurrence in the South. You see black people not able to get employment. You see also that black people were in segregated situations. So for them to see or to hear about all of these European powers going into the heart of Africa, into the mountain fastness of Ethiopia to attend the coronation, it had significant impact. Next slide, please. Look at this. Can you imagine that you could see a European bowing before an African king? For a lot of black people, they had never seen imagery like this. They could never even imagine that this was possible. So it just justified what Marcus Garvey was saying about Africa for the Africans. It was justifying what the great black Pan-Africanists were saying. This was a real imagery of African royalty and showing that we are not less than Europeans. In fact, we have our own royal dignity that is unconquered and unquestionable. Next slide, please. These are pictures of two of the people who bowed before His Majesty at his coronation. You have the Duke of Gloucester, who was related to the King of England at the time. And you have Louis Franchet d'Espèrey, who was a French field marshal who was representing the French government. These were two of the superpowers at the time who had to send representatives. And at this time, you have to realize world leaders didn't travel much because it took weeks to get from Europe to Ethiopia, and it was very dangerous. It was a security hazard, so you didn't have heads of state traveling at that time like you do today. So they would send a representative. Next slide, please. You can see them, this is a picture from the coronation, you can see them decked out in their full regalia because they have to now show that they are important people. Look at all the ribbons and the medals made out of that nice gold they stole from Africa. Isn't it nice and pretty? Next slide, please. These are some of the Ethiopians that you would see that would have attended the coronation. The coronation was also significant in Ethiopia because Ethiopia was not a monolith. Ethiopia was made up of separate kingdoms, and a lot of those kingdoms did not like each other. So at the coronation, they put aside some of their differences to come and to pay homage to the crowning of the king, and it solidified the unity of Ethiopia moving forward, because a lot of them could have chose not to attend. They could have had rebellion, but they chose to acknowledge the ascendancy to the throne of Negos Rastafari. Next slide, please. This is the coronation picture as it appeared in National Geographic in the July edition, 1931. And again, it was very powerful. Because again, to see African royalty in such majesty, it was a very powerful impact. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so you can see here, these are some of the artists that came out of Haile Selassie's coronation. The impact in Jamaica gave rise to the Rastafari movement. And out of the Rastafari movement, we have the singers and the players of instruments that have impacted globally. In the corner, you can see the great Robert Nesta Marley with the image of Haile Selassie in the background. You can see the great Peter Tosh. You can see the great Bonnie Whaler, the Archangel Garnet Silk. You can see some of the new energy in the form of Chronics, Kabaka Pyramid, and Protege, which are close associates of the great Dutty Bookman, who is selecting the music for us today. So these are just some of the people who have been inspired by Haile Selassie I and bring you this great music that the world loves and knows as reggae music. Next slide, please. These are some more artists that have been inspired. We have Capleton, the Prophet. We have Sizzla Kalonji. We have the great Burning Spear, who was named after Jomo Kenyatta, who was the first president of Kenya. You have Dennis Brown, the Crown Prince of Reggae, and you have the great Buju Banta, who is going through some tribulation right now because he did not stay fast to the Rastafari way of life. I'm sorry. Next slide, please. One of the great things, again I said, is that you have Haile Selassie being crowned at the same time as his Empress, Empress Menen, who was Queen of Queens and also shares lineage from the Prophet Muhammad as well as the Solomonic lineage. But a lot of people see the Rastafari man and don't know that there is also the Rastafari women. So these are some of the rising Rastafari women in the reggae music who are making a powerful impact today. We have Janai, we have Kalissa, we have Desiree, Queen Ifrika, and Empress Sativa, which you heard earlier singing Children of the Emperor. So these are some of the impacts of the coronation. So the coronation not only inspired a generation of Pan-Africanists, but it also inspired a new music in the world that again has brought us together today and continues to influence people all around the globe. And Rastafari is one of the few faiths in the world that can boast never having evangelized with the sword and the bayonet. We don't go out there and preach on the corners. It is mainly through the music that the message is traveling through words, sound, and power. So you can see the powerful inspiration of His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie I. And there's a lot of work, so it's not just empty rhetoric or symbolism why we love Haile Selassie I. And saying that, the next presenter is going to come up here and tell you about some of the powerful work that Haile Selassie has done in regards to the Pan-African community. I give thanks for these few words. Let the words of our mouth and the meditations of our heart be humbly and truly acceptable in the sight of the Most High, His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile. Jah. Give thanks and praises.
Setting the stage. I also want to thank Selassie Winter for inviting me and all of you guys for coming out. Until they get the presentation up, I'll just give a brief introduction of myself. Basically, I'm the face behind SelassieStandUp.org, which is a Pan-African organization. Really, that was established to to erect a statue set in front of the African Union building in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, as many of you may know. This last May, they actually celebrated the 50th anniversary. Emperor and Selassie, as you can see, the center front amongst all these people that actually played a key leading role in helping establish the organization. Basically, SelassieStandUp.org. If you go to the website, we have an online petition. If you support the cause, you could go in, sign, and be part of the movement. So that said, I'll talk a little bit about Pan-Africanism and Ethiopia's contribution, focusing on the emperor, but also before the emperor as well. So next slide, please. So this is the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem, New York. Many of you guys may know in 1808, Ethiopian merchants sailed to America, and obviously presumably to increase and develop trade relations with the U.S. And upon their return, they wanted to pray for a safe return back to Ethiopia, and saw that African Americans weren't allowed to give worship equally in the church. And they didn't want to accept that. So they walked out. They were followed by African American Christians who were actually worshiping in the church, and they established their own church called the Abyssinian Baptist Church. This is in 1808. So that sort of tells you, about the Ethiopian character in terms of, the defiance or the resistance that they showed to racial oppression way back when. Next slide, please. Emperor Menelik I, many of you may know, in 1896, Italy invaded Ethiopia, and the Ethiopians, under the leadership of Emperor Menelik, were able to valiantly defeat the invading forces. And next slide, please. And then a year after the victory in the Battle of Adwa, Pan-Africanism, that Africans could emerge victorious and could defeat a European power. That was proven in 1896. About a year or so later, W.B. Du Bois established Pan-Africanism, and you have the definition right there. On a global scale, Henry Sylvester Williams, a Caribbean brother, actually introduced it on a global scale at the London Conference, introduced the concept of Pan-Africanism. Next slide. So I'm referencing Ethiopia, the Battle of Adwa, just to show the role that Ethiopia had, and the fact that it served as a basis for Pan-Africanism. In 1935, you have, again, the invasion by fascist Italy. 36, the emperor appealed directly to the League of Nations. Ethiopia was also a member of the League of Nations at the time. His appeal fell on deaf ears. The global community didn't really care to help Ethiopia. In 1937, he established under the Ethiopian World Federation in 1937, actually Dr. Malaku Benyan established that, who was the personal surgeon or physician of the emperor, who was also a Harvard graduate, who established the Ethiopian World Federation. This is very interesting to me because basically what happened in different cities throughout the US, you had African Americans who were actually registering, signing up to fight for the liberation of Ethiopia. Next slide, please. And so this is the emperor at the League of Nations. Next slide. That's Dr. Malaku Benyan, who established the Ethiopian World Federation in 1937. You go to the next slide. And then here you have a picture of African Americans registering to fight for the liberation of Ethiopia. Let's go to the next slide. And then here's the brown corner. So there was John Charles Robinson and I believe 4 of his other African American friends who actually led the Ethiopian Air Force and actually helped fight for liberation. Go to the next slide. And then basically they're just pictures, showing the emperor who, after his appeal to the League of Nations and stayed in Great Britain, returned to Ethiopia to liberate Ethiopia. Next slide. And then you can go to the next slide as well. Next slide. Next slide. This is Emperor and Selassie featured on Newsweek front cover. Next slide. He was also featured as the Man of the Year in Time magazine. Next slide as well. And this is a picture from his trip to, from his Imperial Majesty's trip to Jamaica. If you go to the next slide, you can see all the hundreds, thousands of people that came out, out of respect for the Emperor. Next slide. More pictures. You go to the next slide. Again, this is when he landed off of the Ethiopian Airlines. Next slide. And there was also a land declaration, basically where the emperor gave land to, lots of land to black people in the diaspora to return to Ethiopia, so you can actually realize, Pan-African. So I guess if there's anything you take away from the presentation, it's really the role of Ethiopia and the emperor in terms of implementing the idea of Pan-Africanism. He was actually able to implement it from, a concept to something that was tangible and that actually had a real impact on the ground. And so you see that to this day, there's still Jamaicans, Rastafarians, who live in Ethiopia on land that was provided by Emperor and Selassie. Next slide, please. Come to the next slide. And go to the next slide as well. So this is them, deliberating on establishing the OAU. And next slide. And there's Emperor and Selassie again, he's center front, Kwame Nkrumah's on the right. Next slide, please. Jomo Kenyatta. Next slide, please. So Emperor, picture of the Emperor. Next slide. Next slide. This is, so the Emperor Haile Selassie actually, the OAU was established on May 25th, 1963. Basically, the Emperor was able to reconcile the differences between two opposing factions. There was a Monrovia group and a Casablanca group that basically had opposing views and philosophical beliefs on how to implement and forge African unity. Emperor Haile Selassie summoned those two groups in Addis Ababa about 50 years ago, and he was able to reconcile the differences, and they actually signed and ratified the charter that served as the governing principle of the OAU. And you see him center front, again right there, presiding over this meeting. Next slide, please. I believe that's the Emperor giving a speech. Next slide. Again, he's center front pictured here, with different members of the OAU as well. Next slide. Again, pictured center front here. Next slide. He was a visionary leader. You can tell by the profile picture. Next slide. Now, this is another interesting story. There's a general of the Ethiopian army, and actually Nelson Mandela. So when Nelson Mandela was exiled from South Africa, he actually went to the Emperor, and he visited with the Emperor, and he was provided military training. He was given an Ethiopian passport, a handgun, and basically was able to return back to South Africa to fight for the struggle and to join the struggle and fight for the independence of South Africa with an Ethiopian identity and an English name. So that's another contribution that the Emperor bestowed upon other African leaders. Ethiopia, even prior to the establishment of the OAU, the UN was a huge advocate of African independence and freedom. Oftentimes fighting for the independence and advocating for the independence of South Africa, Mozambique, Angola, and other countries as well. Next slide, please. That was Nelson Mandela's passport, actually, that was issued by the Ethiopian government that he used to return to South Africa. Next slide. Again, this is two Sudanese people who, and perhaps Selassie was able to create peace amongst them. Next slide. And basically, this kind of comes back 360 to the SelassieStandUp.org initiative. We're very honored and pleased to see a statue of Kwame Nkrumah standing center in front of the AU building. It's a big statue. It says, I believe, Ethiopia says, stretch your hands into God. That's a biblical reference. And you see Kwame Nkrumah's statue there. Kwame Nkrumah was a former Ghanaian president. He did a lot for African community. But the Emperor's statue is missing. And so Selassie Stand Up basically is calling for a statue to be erected. Next slide. And thanks to Robel Casa, I don't know if he's here, I know he was here, he actually created the website, free of charge, pro bono, so I have to thank him for that. If you go to SelassieStandUp.org, you can click that green button, it'll take you directly to our petition on change.org. And basically, if you sign it, you'll be supporting the Selassie Stand Up call for action, simply just to erect the statue center front of the African Union building. We believe it's important because there are people who are trying to rewrite history, and so we really stand for the truth in history, and we want the truth in history to be preserved. And so with that, I know the DJ wants to play music. I know you guys want to party, have a good time, so I'll wrap it up. If you guys have any questions, please ask me. Enjoy the rest of the night.
Yeah, give thanks. Music again. Each of us depends on the other, can learn from the other, and in pursuing his own destiny will go further and succeed more quickly with others. This is why we are here, and these are the words from the wise mind of His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie, the first, not the second, not the third. See?
And they try to the black population by telling them that Jaja Haile knows that Janodi do no Janodi. My knowledge increase, my memory effect, my costia would say, I will Ruma, and my heart person. Ruma, and my heart person. Janodi.
By the name of Chronix. Tell me if you know this one. This one is for the king and the queen. Alpha and Omega.
J and
Here we go.
Sit by the king and the man and the fly down far. Step on the beast and keep up with him like a slide down far. We burn this